My wife tried to tell me. She did not shout. She did not threaten to leave. She did not make dramatic speeches in the middle of the night. She tried to tell me in small ways, and I did not listen. If you had asked me back then whether I loved my wife, I would have answered without hesitation. Of course I loved her. I worked hard. I provided. I stayed faithful. I believed those things were the foundation of a strong marriage. What I did not understand was that love is not only proven through loyalty and responsibility, it is also proven through attention, through curiosity, through noticing subtle changes before they become permanent distance. My wife began telling me something was wrong long before anything actually broke. She would say she felt overwhelmed. She would say she missed how we used to talk. She would say she felt alone sometimes, even when I was sitting right beside her. I heard the words. I did not hear the meaning. I treated her concerns like temporary moods. I assumed they would pass. I believed that if there was no crisis, then there was no real problem. In my mind, serious issues came with raised voices, slammed doors, or ultimatums. What she was offering me instead were invitations. Invitations to notice. Invitations to adjust. Invitations to reconnect. I brushed them aside without realizing what they were. When she said she felt alone, I responded with logic. I told her that I was right there. I reminded her of everything I was doing for our family. I listed responsibilities like evidence in a courtroom, convinced that if I could prove my effort, her feelings would correct themselves. Feelings do not respond to evidence. They respond to presence. She would try again a few weeks later. The same concern, phrased slightly differently, a different example, a softer tone. I interpreted repetition as exaggeration. I assumed she was being overly sensitive. What I failed to see was persistence. She was not trying to criticize me. She was trying to save us. There is a dangerous comfort in believing that your intentions are enough. I intended to be a good husband. I intended to create stability. I intended to build a secure future. Those intentions felt solid in my mind, and because they felt solid, I assumed the relationship itself was solid. But intention does not automatically translate into impact. The impact of my behavior was distance. I was often distracted. My attention was divided between work, finances, all responsibilities, and the constant mental checklist that never seemed to end. When she spoke to me, I listened for the main point, not the emotion underneath. If she expressed frustration, I searched for a solution instead of understanding. I believed that solving problems was the same as supporting her. It was not. Support sometimes requires stillness. It requires sitting with discomfort without trying to fix it. It requires acknowledging feelings without reducing them to tasks. My wife tried to tell me this in subtle ways. She would pause during conversations, waiting for me to ask a follow-up question. I rarely did. She would share something personal, hoping I would lean in. I often responded with a brief comment and returned to whatever was occupying my thoughts. Over time, her efforts became quieter. That should have alarmed me. Instead, I interpreted the silence as improvement. I told myself that we had moved past the tension. I believed the absence of complaints meant the presence of peace. Silence is not always peace. Sometimes it is surrender. Looking back, I can see the pattern clearly. She would express a need. I would minimize it. She would try again. I would defend myself. Eventually, she stopped trying. not because she stopped caring, because she grew tired of feeling unheard. There is a particular exhaustion that comes from explaining yourself repeatedly to someone who insists they already understand. I thought I understood her because I knew her routines, her preferences, her history. I did not realize that understanding is ongoing. People evolve. Feelings shift. Needs change. I was relating to the version of her I had first known, not the woman she was becoming. When she said she felt disconnected, I heard criticism. I heard accusation. I heard unfair judgment. What I did not hear was vulnerability. It takes courage to admit loneliness inside a marriage. It takes courage to say, I need more from you. Instead of recognizing that courage, I treated it like inconvenience. I told myself that she was overreacting. I told myself that marriage naturally becomes less intense over time. I told myself that real love is steady and practical, not emotional and demanding. Those beliefs protected my pride. They damaged my marriage. The truth is simple, and it is painful. She tried to tell me before she reached her limit. She tried to bring me into the conversation while there was still time to shift direction. I did not listen because listening would have required change, and change would have required admitting that I was contributing to the problem. It is easier to defend your effort than to examine your impact. By the time I realized that difference, something essential had already begun to slip away, and that is where the real loss started. The change did not arrive with a dramatic argument. It arrived with quiet. She stopped insisting. She stopped repeating herself. She stopped asking whether we could talk. At first, I felt relief. The tension that used to surface every few weeks seemed to fade. There were fewer difficult conversations, fewer emotional moments that left me feeling accused or defensive. I told myself we had moved into a calmer phase of marriage. I believed we had matured. What I did not understand was that she had grown tired. When someone tries to express a need repeatedly and feels dismissed each time, they eventually protect themselves by lowering their expectations. That protection looks like peace on the surface. Underneath, it is detachment. I remember one evening clearly. We were sitting at the kitchen table after dinner. There was nothing unusual about the day, no crisis, no visible conflict. She looked at me and said she felt alone in this marriage. Her voice was steady. That steadiness unsettled me more than anger would have. I responded the way I always had. I explained how much I worked. I explained how much pressure I carried. I explained that everything I did was for us. I believed that if she understood my effort more clearly, she would reconsider her conclusion. She listened patiently. When I finished, she said something that cut through every defense I had built. She said she no longer felt safe sharing her emotions with me because I always turned them into arguments. In that moment, I saw myself differently. Every time she opened up, I evaluated her feelings as if they were claims that needed to be verified. If they did not match my perception, I corrected them. If they suggested I had failed in some way, I defended myself. I thought I was protecting the relationship from unfair criticism. In reality, I was protecting my ego. Listening requires humility. It requires accepting that another person's emotional reality does not have to align with your logic in order to be valid. I did not understand that. I believed clarity would solve everything. I did not realize that empathy was what she had been asking for all along. After that conversation, I began to notice patterns that had once seemed insignificant. The way she hesitated before bringing up concerns, the way she softened her tone, almost preparing for resistance, the way our conversations had shifted from deep and personal to practical and procedural. We were managing a household. We were not nurturing a marriage. By the time I was ready to change, exhaustion had replaced hope on her side. Change is possible, but it loses power when it arrives only after someone has reached their emotional limit. She did not leave because of one harsh word or one terrible fight. She left because of accumulation. Small dismissals repeated over years, conversations redirected, feelings minimized. Each instance alone seemed survivable. Together, they reshaped the foundation of our relationship. I used to believe that love was proven through endurance and responsibility. Now, I understand that love also requires responsiveness. It requires adjusting when someone you care about tells you they are hurting, even if you do not fully understand why. My wife tried to tell me while there was still time. She tried when the distance was small enough to close. She tried when effort could still have made a difference. I did not listen because listening would have required me to admit that I was contributing to her loneliness. If you hear similar words in your own life, do not debate them. Do not treat them as accusations to dismantle. Treat them as signals. Signals that something precious needs attention. Silence is not safety. Calm is not always contentment. Listen while the person you love is still willing to speak, because once they stop trying to tell you, the decision may already have been made.